No one better not be doing no poetry around here. Way to start off the stream with a triple negative, Wobbledopsy. Welcome into stream, everyone. Bookworm, what? Wobbledopsy, Electman, Nikki, Face Your Fear, Furry, Combat, Wombat, so many people. We're already redeeming me next. Oh, Drowning Devil too, welcome in. Already vying to have our poetry read on stream. Welcome in everyone. Hello, hi, good morning, beautiful people, poets, poetic, literary individuals, folk of the internet. It is I, Imogen. I'm live. I feel great. I slept well last night. I didn't sleep as much, but I slept well. And you don't always have to sleep a lot if the sleep is like good sleep, you know? And it was. So I'm here. I'm like super alive. And it's great. I'm also like hella poetically inspired. There's a part of me that almost just wants to like be holed up like writing and like scribbling away at this like big idea that I have that I kind of need to have done by Wednesday. But but stream. But stream. And it's good to consume art, and consuming art allows us so often to create new art. So there's that. Some of us have over 80,000 channel points, and Ginny thought it would be hilarious to give us a way to just dump them. Yes, it is always good to have a point redeem in your Twitch stream, which looks like it does something, you know, me next, and does nothing at all, right? Because y'all can shout me next, and at the end of the day, I'm just gonna choose whatever poem I want to read or piece of prose that I want to read from the submissions, and that is the fate. Imogen improvises a poem. Oh my gosh, Wobbledopsy. Way to start me off in the hot seat. Throw me into the fire. Is there anything you would like me to improvise a poem about? Um, Wobbledopsy. That is a question. Otherwise, it will just end up being about some of the things on my mind and all of that. Um, but yeah, that's exciting. Improvising a poem. Gardening or volcanoes? Your choice. All right, gardening or volcanoes. That's interesting. Gardening on that's you saying gardening on volcanoes. There's kind of a thing with volcanoes, right? That they in like fire and in eruption and in cataclysm, usually there's like a rebirth that allows new things to grow or whatever, right? Um, I think I want to do gardening. I'm a I'm a big maybe I should do volcanoes because I write lots of poems about gardens and I write lots of things about plants and seeds. So I think that means I'm gonna have to improvise a poem about volcanoes. Yeah. Volcanic ash is a gardening thing? Interesting. Flowery language is OP. Yeah. Okay. Volcanoes. There's a lot of directions to take this one. Let me think for a second. Uh, where do I want to put the volcano? Because it can be scenery, it could be myself, it can be this like looming thing on the horizon, it can be, you know, um, all was still in a world, my world of cultivation. The seeds gently tugging their way upward. The weave of stalks and stems, flowers and fruits, reaching to a bright sky. All was still. In my world of cultivation, under a bright gleaming sky, until the rumbling came. Until I felt a pressure in my chest. A racing pace, a thrumming of lava tubes, hot, red liquid running, pushing. The coagulation of something new. Heat bursting forth, chest rising, straining against itself as if the stone was breaking atop my chest. Everything was still. In my cultivated world, until the seed of my mind opened, until the thoughts came in, and the breaths caught on the clouding ash, until the mind filled with thrashing, crashing thought, opening up into something new, always something new, an eruption of something once still. A stone once inert, a seed once unsprouted, a leaf not yet unfurled, a blossom not yet blossomed. Everything was still. Until life stepped in. Until the body decided to start playing the game, decided to start scoring points, to push into something, to become. And I couldn't help it, stop it, keep it down. Nothing could cap the eruption exploding out the sides of my rib cage. I can't keep the words down, that this feeling can't be kept down, that I can't be kept down, that you can't keep us down, that it won't stay down, that I'm down. Down below in a world of stillness under ash. Down. A world of fire overhead. And a burning inside. And a yearning for life. That cannot be unsaid. It's all right. It's all right. I got the volcano and the garden in there for you. There's a similar tone to those things if we allow it. I don't know what I would call that. It's kind of vague. It's kind of vague. I don't know. I wanted to bring it closer to something concrete, but it's hard when you're in the moment of improvising poetry to rein it in. So it goes. Can't expect too much of improvisation, at least with poetry, maybe. Imagine a short film where poetry is illegal, carrying a death sentence, but due to overly broad definition, even accidentally rhyming could send you to the gallows, perchance. Perchance. That would be an interesting setup for a story. I think the policing of language is certainly something that works well. Flower poem using deliberately unflowery language could be cool. That could be cool. Yeah, definitely. The volcano could be a body. It seems it was in this poem, yeah. The volcano could be a friend. It could. It could be two bodies of two friends. A volcano could be the send button on that text message. Yeah, I like that. That's a good direction to take that one. This feels like a random panic attack on a good day. Yeah, maybe it kind of does, right? Like a thought coming in and exploding and being like overwhelming and stuff. Just one snap because you're a toxic hater. You are a toxic hater, Furry Combat Wombat. All right, who has poetry submitted to me on the Discord? We need to deflect back onto some poetry that isn't mine. Uh yeah, who has things sent to me on Discord or on the Google forum? You have stuff, Wombat. Uh Nikki has stuff. I took backseat the title I gave you yesterday since you said you wouldn't use it. Yeah, I see you used uninstallme.exe. That's a good title. Nikki has poetry. Bookworm has poetry. Drowning Devil has poetry. Probably won't do Drowning Devil. What was the last thing we read of Wombat? Wombat, what was the last thing of yours that I read? Has it been a while, or has it not been a while? I really don't remember. Uh, oh, you have Shirley the Greatest Duelist. That's right. Long poem. Uh, I think it's been a while. I also Bookworm. What was the last thing we read of yours? I don't remember either. Um, Tomorrow. Oh, we read the Lobster poem. Right. Yeah. Welcome in, Eric's the Great. I'm currently asking the question if anyone has things submitted to me. Um, so that's kind of what's happening. Uh, oh, but we read your rant poem pretty recently, so we're probably not reading anything from you. Um, I have a short long poem, surely, and a long short poem. A short long poem and a long short poem. That's a great way to describe them. Uh, okay, Bookworm. Maybe today's like a Bookworm and Furry Combat Wombat kind of day. Um, I see you have a lot of things submitted, Bookworm. Is there anything that you would most likely like me to read? Um, and then Face Your Fear. Yeah, the rest of chapter one is negligible. We did kind of get very close to the end of it. Oh, we read Bookworms. I'm tired. Right. Let's start with Furry Combat Wombat, I think. And would you like? Do you have a preference, Wombat, of if I read the Sum of Shirley the Greatest Duelist, like part one, or if you'd rather me read Sprint, Not a Marathon? I'm down for either. I think uh yeah, it's definitely just your call. I would love if you read Mirage or Tears. Okay. It's a sprint on a marathon is submitted longer, so maybe that. Understandable. Then it won't get lost to time. Usually, if something gets kind of skipped, I very rarely like go back to it. So we can find that one. Uh, was that submitted? Has submitted at the same time as the lobster? Okay, so that's been sitting for a pretty long time. Oh, it is pretty long. Yeah. Okay. Furry Combat Wombat, as I go into reading this poem, do you have any questions, any things you would like me to consider, any ideas or themes you would like me to focus on as I read this work? Or is it just up to me and my pure, unfiltered interpretive powers? I actually have a question. What is it? Right, we have this poem, It is a sprint, right? It is a sprint, not a marathon. And that's a reasonable question, right? Whenever, I think in any poem, when we're reading it, if we have like this pronoun, a you, an it, even a me, I think it's a reasonable thing to ask the question of what that actually is. Because for example, me isn't always the poet or like the author, and it is like necessarily quite a vague term. So that can often mean a lot of things, and it can be a great way to analyze a work to just say like, okay, I have this pronoun, this you, this it, this we in a poem, and just explore the different possibilities of like what that could be interpreted as. And in this case, we have it that is a sprint, not a marathon, which is interesting. I feel like personally in my life, I tend toward preferring the marathon over the sprint. I'm someone who likes to slow down and to pace myself with things. So this might be an interesting poem for me. So that's good. Yeah. Let's jump in this poem and we will ask the question eventually, what is it that is a sprint and not a marathon? And as always, chat, you are more than welcome as we read along to provide your thoughts, feedback, comments, interpretations, analysis. That is more than welcome and encouraged. It's also fine to just listen. It's a sprint, not a marathon. From the moment my ears could discern names among sounds, I heard stories, legends of those who had made it. What is it? What is the it that beckons pursuit, that forces one beyond survival like some forbidden but required fruit? I ran, sprinted from the moment I could form words and thoughts of my own, divorced from what I heard before. I saw my goal. I saw it on the horizon. I followed it as if it preached from the pulpit, made myself a pawn. I grew closer and closer. My aptitude grew and grew. My appetite still unsatiated through and through. But as I closed the gap with it grew further. Hyperbolic space, it ever receding as I chase. I had to find it. I had to chase it. I had to ensure my life had a place in it. That my name would not be erased if it was sufficient to stake my claim on history, art, culture, fame. I see up ahead so many closer to it than I. I am falling behind. Nobody is near me anymore. I see them all feeling the embrace of it. The farther away, the faster that they escape my dreams, the faster that they split the region between me and it. With nobody left within my gaze toward it, I jogged alone, heaving through the haze. Was this what I was worth? To be left behind? Struggling in last place? Was this the fate befitting of my mind? Not passing a single person in this race? I stopped running and turned around. Away from it, I sought to see how much distance I crossed for naught. I saw in the distance, along my past path, miles behind me, a dense cloud of hundreds, thousands, millions, walking, belonging to it. It is a sprint, not a marathon. By Furry Combat Wombat. This poem is fun. As usual with a wombat poem, it has like some lovely sound going on. But I feel as we read this poem, you know, this it like just continuing to be used throughout the poem it feels very effective, right? In just making this thing such an object of interest, desire, ambition, right? Whatever it is, right? The continual repetition of it over and over and over again through the poem, right? I think really allows for it to feel like, you know, this speaker, this voice is like hyper fixated on this thing, right? As we're finding it, chasing it, and sure, my life had a place in it, right? Over and over and over again, right? And then we have this turn at the end, right? I stopped running and turned around, literally a turn, right? Away from it, I sought to see how much distance I crossed for naught. I saw in the distance along my path, miles behind me, a dense cloud of hundreds, thousands, millions walking, belonging to it. And I think, as we like approach asking the question of like what is it? I think there are a few lines in this poem that stick out to me as helping us understand the nature of it. And one of them is this line here, you know, that my name would not be erased if it was sufficient to stake my claim on history, art, culture, fame. Right? I had to find it. I had to chase it. I had to ensure my life had a place in it. That my name would not be erased if it was sufficient to stake my claim on history, art, culture, fame. And I think this section is very interesting, right? Because we've set up the idea just before this that it isn't really reachable, right? As I closed the gap with it, it grew farther, hyperbolic space, it ever receding as I chased, right? So we have this idea, like, as we get closer and closer to this thing, we can never actually reach it, and it almost feels like we get further away in some capacity. It makes me think of a graph with an asymptote, to be mathematical, where as you'll take like an exponential function like this, and it gets steeper and steeper and steeper to the point where it never reaches a certain point. And as it gets closer to this thing, it keeps getting exponentially larger, but never crosses that point. Right? And it's almost like as we're far away, it feels like we're very rapidly getting closer to this thing. And then as we get closer, it's like we stop getting closer, right? I mean, hyperbolas literally have asymptotes. Ah, I see. I forgot what a hyperbola is because it's been a long time since I've been in math. So yeah, hyperbolic space. We can look that up for the less math inclined of us. Hyperbola. I see. Oh, right, these guys. A symmetrical open curve formed by the intersection of a circular cone, blah, 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 blah. These guys. So, with this hyperbola, that's not a great... I'm gonna copy the image, I think. It's fine, actually. We'll do this picture, right? So you have these lines. This is the hyperbola out here, and it has these asymptotes here that it like never actually crosses. And these lines get kind of closer and closer to them, but never crosses that threshold. Man, that was like sophomore year of high school. It's been so long since I've had to think about a hyperbola. So yeah, right, ever receding as I chase. So we have this idea of a thing that like basically it seems like everybody is after, right? And I think that's what we end up with in the end, right? I look behind me, a dense cloud, hundreds, thousands, millions walking, belonging to it. Right? So this is something that in some way, like, everyone kind of pursues or moves toward, right? And so I think there are these ideas of, like, time and death and, like, this sort of immortality of art and being known. There's just the idea generally of like ambition and like some meaning and like whatever it is that we pursue, right? But this poem keeps it necessarily vague, which I think is nice. I think there are lots of things that we can insert onto it that make sense with the poem, right? Another thing that I think is interesting, right? We have, I grew closer and closer, my aptitude grew and grew, right? Where did that go? Um, my aptitude grew and grew, right? So there's this idea that getting closer means like acquiring some amount of skill, right? And I think there's this idea of like pursuing some kind of perfection. I mean, we describe it as if it preached from the pulpit, right? I made myself its pawn, it being a king. Also, I love the pawn imagery here, right? Because a pawn on a chessboard, right? This guy, um, how do I draw a pawn? Pawn has that, goes up, and then we have a pawn, right? You take a pawn, and it moves on your chessboard, right? Single spaces straight forward, right? So I love that we get like the double meaning of pawn in some capacity, that like it makes us advance straight toward it with sort of no variation of path, right? But then also make myself a pawn, as in to be subservient to something, right? The pawn serves the king, similar to like as if it preached from the pulpit, a god, something I listen to and follow, kind of tacitly in some way. Um, and if it ever reached the end of the board, it can become a queen. That's true. That's a great thing on the image, right? That we're trying to reach this like hypothetical end that offers great reward, whatever this is. And yeah, it allows us to promote into a queen, right? To sort of, I mean, in that sense, um, marry, right? This end point, this king, this final notion, right? So that's very cool. I want to read this poem again. Oh, I wanted to say about this aptitude line, right? My aptitude grew and grew as I go on. And I think there's this feeling of like this resonates to me in some way, of like me as a perfectionist in my life, where when you're pursuing like some amount of skill, for example, let's say me in music school, I was playing saxophone, and I was in high school and I was getting really good at saxophone, right? And I was like practicing all the time, and I was going to these like uh going to like all state band and these like competitions, right? And my aptitude, right, was rapidly increasing, right? If we like put it on a graph, right? But when you're so focused on getting better and your skill going up, basically you end up like looking forward, or I end up, right, in this case, always looking at the people who are better than me, right? Because that's who you learn from. You learn from those who are like ahead of you on the path. And if you're good and you keep getting better, you want to keep surpassing all of these people, right? And moving ahead. And once I get past, like the skill of random middle schoolers, I'm no longer like looking at these people comparing myself to them. Once I get past the skill of like everyone else in my high school, I'm no longer looking at these people. I no longer compare myself to them. Honestly, I was pretty like Machiavellian and cynical, and I'm like, these people no longer mean anything to me. I was pretty messed up as a high schooler. Um, and then I'm like, okay, I'm like the best saxophone player in the state. Like now I need to look for like new people and keep going up, keep going up, keep getting better. And what ends up happening is you just end up comparing yourself to people who are more unreachable. I'm like, now I'm comparing myself to like XYZ, like college student or like professor. And I'm like, I want to be like them. I want to be better than them. And it's always focused on like what's ahead. And I always thought when I was playing saxophone, and this was kind of where it went badly for me, I always thought I was bad, right? Because I was always looking ahead to the people who were better than me, because those were the people who I would learn from and be able to pursue and sprint after. And I never took the time, as this poem does, to turn around and look back, right? To stop running, turn around and realize, right? And that's in any pursuit. I feel like when we get so focused on an end, and an end that is sort of unreachable, because like, what is this like perfection? You can't be like perfect in any kind of art, right? We lose track of how far we've come. And it's really, I like the use in this poem of how much distance I crossed for naught, right? As though the fact that there are still people in front of me in this poem means that my effort has not been validated because I want to be all the way entirely in the front. And so this poem, I think, is just looking certainly at this idea of always pushing ahead, always looking to be better, always looking to pass people, and certainly like criticizing that notion, right? Or at least maybe speaking of one's own experience of, I don't know Furry Combat Wombat as a poet, but this idea of pursuing something so deeply and then having this moment of realization, being like, I can't do this. Why am I not passing anyone? Why do I suck at everything? Right? And then turning around, right? Turning around and like realizing. And then it's like this big moment where it's sort of like invalidated all of these thoughts, right? Struggling in last place, left behind, and then realizing like, oh, I've left so many people behind who aren't even running, who aren't even, kind of trying, right, relative to me in this poem. And on these exponential graphs, the distance between each jump increases. Yeah, it's like you get to like more minute, like incremental growth, right? There's like, you get like diminishing returns, right? Maybe that's one way to see it. Or like, if we take the exponential graph, right? We'll draw the graph again. Here's our asymptote of like infinite perfection, right? And we start here and we go like this, and then we get up this way, and then we're like that. And if this is how close we are along this axis to perfection, right? So we're trying to get all the way to this point. And it's fairly easy, right? At the start, you kind of go toward the thing faster than maybe the amount of like time this takes, right? And then you get better and it's like, oh, now it's like kind of harder to improve, and the gains are sort of more incremental along this way for more effort, right? And then you keep going, and then at this point, right, it takes like kind of a lot of time and skill and effort and work to get just a little bit further toward this thing. I think this is almost better done as a logarithmic curve, honestly, with skill on this and effort here, right? But it's the idea of diminishing return, right? And that's definitely, I think, something that this poem does talk on, right? I'm unpinning the comment only because I'm in EJ's stream. Not sure when he'll be done. Sure. Yeah, so I'm going to read this whole poem again because I think there's some other ideas in here that are worth coming back to and looking deeply into. It's a sprint, not a marathon. From the moment my ears could discern names among sounds, I heard stories, legends of those who had made it. So I think this opening is very important, right? It connects down to, I think, this line in here, right? That my name would not be erased if it was sufficient to stake my claim on history, art, culture, fame. So there's this idea of like having a name, right? Having a name that is remembered, that kind of becomes legend, right? I heard stories, legends of those who had made it, right? To make it, to become successful, to become like known, to become, whatever, this like it's almost become not human, right? When you become legend, when you become cultural figure and object, right? This sort of goes from human to like something else, right? And we could, think of all kinds of these figures, right? Names among sounds. I heard stories, legends of those who had made it, and whether it's poets, right? We always hear about the best poets ever, and it's like, okay, like Shakespeare, and like Basho, and like Blake, and like Pushkin, and like Neruda, right? And I don't know, Whitman, right? That's our like names of poetry, right? If we want to think about, those legends who have made it. And there are these people in all sorts of other fields, I don't know what everyone in my chat is into, but if it's painters, your Van Gogh, your you know, Caravaggio, your Da Vinci, your whatever, right? These great painters and artists, and so on, for music and all kinds of art and all kinds of anything, right? Canonization, yeah, canonization is the word for it. To become someone who is a great figure, a great man or woman in a thing. I have Neruda with me. Translations helps me sleep at night. That's awesome. Yeah. So that's kind of what this evokes for me, right? This idea of, these kind of great men or great women of history, right? Unfortunately, it's mostly great men because of how history has panned out. From the moment my ears could discern names among sounds, I heard stories, legends of those who had made it. Also, I love this. It's like, from the moment my ears could discern names, as if, this has always been the case, and this person, this narrator, this speaker, has kind of always been predisposed toward this idea of the great, right? I think I'm quite like this personally, right? Always hearing about great things and thinking like, okay, well, I want to do that, right? I want this ambition. I personally read poetry, and I'm like, I want to be able to do the things they do, and I will like catch up to these people. It's this like ambitious kind of mindset that really drives you. But what is it? What is the it that beckons pursuit, that forces one beyond survival, like some forbidden but required fruits? Interesting to take like the Genesis reference here, the forbidden fruit, because this is the fruit of knowledge, right? In Christianity, right? And they eat the fruit, and then they like understand, Adam and Eve, that they are both like selves, and they kind of get this ego, and then they like are able to have shame because they understand themselves as different from each other, and as people, right? And conscious, not so much as some other like more basic form, without knowledge, without kind of self-reference. So so it's interesting that we take this, right? We use this idea of knowledge, right? We have in here, we have knowledge, we have aptitude, right? We even have imagery like, you know, chess, right? Which I think people think of as something that like smart people do, is like, oh, you're smart, are you good at chess or whatever. It's funny because as when I was a kid, I was like really, I was very good at chess. I wasn't like great at chess, but I was when I was in like elementary school. I was doing like competitions and stuff, and I went to like the state chess competition or whatever when I was in, maybe when I was in like kindergarten. Um, I was against like other people my age. I wasn't like some prodigy. I did okay, but like I think it's interesting that we have a lot of this imagery here about knowledge, right? And these things that we pursue, And we think of even like looking at chess specifically as imagery, right? You can uh you know chess is one of those things that like you can learn a lot of chess and it can get you like pretty good, and it's not that hard, I think, to learn like the fundamental like strategies of chess, and that gets you like your whatever like 1500 like ranking, right? um but then to become like a grandmaster and like a Magnus Carlsen is to learn all these like tiny intricacies and like um, eke out tiny little bits of getting better and minute advantages. So I think that in another way works on a third level for something like this. But I think that goes for any pursuit. Not all smart people are really good at chess, but all people who are really good at chess are smart, I'd say. I think I'm not sure, right? I think there are definitely people who are like savant like and like very, very good at like a single thing and are like kind of not very functional in like anything else, right? And I think it's the same with like a saxophone here, right? And me in high school. I was really, really good at saxophone and I like pursued this thing at great length. Um, and it made the everything else in my life way worse. And I was like, so I think sometimes we pursue these things. Like they're probably very like logical, tactical people, which maybe we associate with smart. I guess it depends on smart and what you define it is as. Some people might say like dumping a whole bunch of time into playing a abstract board game is a very dumb thing to do, impractical. Anyway, what is it? What is the it that beckons pursuit that forces one beyond survival like some forbidden but required fruit? Interesting, like forces beyond survival, right? As if like this thing is more important than life. There are people who will sacrifice themselves and their lives and everything else for the pursuit. And I think people do this with knowledge. Um, but I think it might be more like the greatness in any one thing. I also love that like there's also this idea in beyond survival of like beyond death, right? In these legends and these great people and these sort of like immortalization, right? That we have in this, right? That my name would not be erased. So there's also the idea that like the pursuit of this thing allows us to become, you know, greater than to like surpass death, right? And we talk about this a lot in art. We talk about it sometimes in stream, but like the idea that art can immortalize, right? To become canon, to use that word, can immortalize your words and in a sense immortalize you, right? And that can be done also through like pursuits of knowledge, right? We have like Isaac Newton, for example, is has been immortalized in human knowledge. And so long as humans, I think, are doing science and math, and we exist, Newton remains alive in some capacity, right? And so goes to for all of the other mathematicians, your Einsteins of the world and whatever, right? So to be to immortalize yourself through like a contribution to humanity, right? In a way. Anyway, I ran, sprinted from the moment I could form words and thoughts of my own, divorced from what I heard before. And I think it's very consistent with this idea if we're using the idea of forming words and thoughts in association with this idea of like an intellectual or artistic or political or mathematic like contribution to the world. Like words are an abstract intellectual thing, words and thoughts. And I like that it's form words and thoughts of my own, divorced from what I heard before, right? So it's not just being able to do any words, but there's the idea here of like doing something new, doing something creative. And And I like this idea of doing something truly new that has never been done before, because in that way, um, to go back to like the god imagery or like the promotion of the pawn imagery, right? It's to do this thing that surpasses one's form. You know, there's the idea of like creating something new as almost like playing God in a way. Like Newton and Einstein, through their contributions, basically like inscribed like laws onto the world that humanity from then on like had to understand and follow to move forward from that point, right? And that's almost like a godlike kind of thing, which makes it, I think, very consistent with the description. You know, preaching from the pulpit, making myself a pawn, right? Going toward like a vague horizon. There's a special type of high one gets from knowing that people they've never interacted with are talking to each other about them. Yeah, that's a. I don't know if I've ever been like certain uh, that's something that happens with me, but I imagine that's quite a lovely feeling, right? To know, and I imagine like the mathematician, right, who publishes their research and then sees like someone else doing like new research based on the conclusions they made. That's probably such an incredible thing, right? You're sort of become part of someone else's experience. You're made alive in some way in a place that you aren't. Cloud, welcome. Hello. We're reading poetry. So, we have this. I ran, I sprinted. From the moment I could form words and thoughts of my own, divorced from what I heard before. I saw my goal. I saw it. On the horizon, I followed it as if it preached from the pulpit, made myself a pawn. I like how you use a lot of words. I don't know if it's intentional in this poem that like have it, right? Like pulp it rhymes with it. I guess that's maybe just like rhyming, but it's fun that there are lots of words, right? But like pursuit, right, very cleverly has it within the word, even though it doesn't rhyme with it, right? I think there are a number of examples of that happening in this poem. I gotta say, I struggled for about 20 minutes trying to figure out whether I should put an apostrophe in the it's in the pawn line, because of it being like an uncapitalized proper noun, lol. Yeah, I made myself its pawn. So basically, uh, with it, with its, this one always got me for a while, so I just made sure to like commit it to thought. But it, if you have the apostrophe in its, it is always acting as a contraction, right? This is always a contraction. It is never for the possessive of like of you know, its fur, right? Talking about the dog, its fur is brown. It's always going to be its like this, because that word is possessive. And then it's with an apostrophe always is meaning it is. And like that's what it is. In the same way of don't, you know, is always do not. The apostrophe is functioning in that way. But it's annoying, right? Because we use apostrophes possessively in other parts of grammar. So so that's where the confusion comes in, right? That if we said, you know, wombat, referring to wombat in chat as a name, it's wombat's poem with an apostrophe, right? We love English, such a consistent language. Yeah, it's really lovely how it has rules that are always the same. Uh, but that's part of the beauty of it, I think. I grew closer and closer. My aptitude, right there it is again in this poem, like it kind of being within words and appetite. I grew closer and closer, my aptitude grew and grew, my appetite still unsatiated through and through. But as I closed the gap with it, it grew farther, hyperbolic space, it ever receding as I chase. I had to find it. It's interesting we have chase here, like present tense as I chase. I guess it rhymes just directly with space. But it was like past tense, all through. Then we have chase. I had to find it. It almost like points to the fact that this is still occurring in like a subtle way. I had to find it. I had to chase it, had to ensure my life had a place in it. And this is, I really enjoy this line as like a single kind of poetic one-liner, right? Sometimes we have these very like clever phrases, and I think this is one of them, right? We would think about often like, I would ensure that something, we usually say, right, that something or someone, something gets a place in my life, right? That's a phrase we would use, you know. This important concept or idea has a place in my life, a special place in my life. This person occupies a special place in my life. But this flips it really nicely on its head. I had to ensure my life had a place in it, right? So it's almost like in what we said earlier, that forces one beyond survival, like giving one's life over to this thing that is being pursued. And maybe that's like kind of in a way like an answer starting to form of what is it, right? What does the attainment of it look like? And it's almost like giving one's life, right? And we talked about like canonization and immortalization, right? And so long as you are alive, you're still kind of chasing. You're still kind of pursuing this thing if you're one of these ambitious people who always wants to go after it. And it's only once like you've given everything and like died, right, that one kind of becomes transformed into legend, right? I mean, we sort of have like living legends, right? But we can also think of like the painter and their work getting more valuable after their death, right? Is kind of how some of that feels. But it becomes almost like a sacrificial kind of situation for the sake of knowledge, for the sake of this end. Like a bunch of people running to the slaughter is kind of how this poem feels in a way, which it is. Like that's all we're doing as people. That's all we're doing as people is all running toward our death, basically, to be existential and tragic about it. But you win if you get a bridge named after you. Yeah, I think if you die and you don't get a bridge named after you, no bridge, right? Shit. No bridge, right? This means you failed. This means you cannot succeed. Your life is over. You're wallowing, falling into oblivion. But if you get a bridge, specifically a bridge, you've made it. I think I agree with that. I would love to have a bridge named after me. I love bridges. No bridges. Megamind meme, yeah. I see up ahead. No. I had to find it, I had to chase it, I had to ensure my life had a place in it, that my name would not be erased if it was sufficient to stake my claim on history, art, culture, fame. And this like is sort of a very central. This is like maybe like one of the more central, like I feel like parts of this poem in terms of like I feel like understanding it, right? This like my stake on history, art, culture, fame, and it's like one of the first things I underlined when I was looking at this poem. But it's also like really hard to like parse this section, right? That my name would not be erased if it was sufficient to stake my claim on history, art, culture, m dash fame, right? And that's sort of like a really weird kind of like grammatically vague line or set of lines, which I think is good, right? Vagueness here I think is working because it A lot of this poem is very clear, right? I had to find it, right? Like this doesn't like feel on its own like a very poetic line, but through the construction of this poem, it is definitely poetic. But when we have a lot of simplicity, right? It grew further. I had to find it. I followed it as if it preached from the pulpit. None of this is difficult to read. When we get to this line, right, that my name would not be erased if it was sufficient to stake my claim on history, art, culture, fame. It's like, whoa, there's like a very real contrast that appears here that I think works really well for the poem, and this like sticks up off the page in a way, because everything else is very simple, and then we have this like nebulous, very central, part. It's right here in the poem, very in the middle, and it has this kind of fuzziness to it, right? So, what does that mean, right? That my name would not be erased if it was sufficient to stake my claim on history, art, culture, fame. And the interesting is we have it, if it was sufficient, right? If chasing this thing, if doing this pursuit, that my name would not be erased. Ensure, okay, I had to ensure, right, that my name would not be erased if it was sufficient. But it has this if, right? I think it kind of does something in this poem that calls into question, which maybe sets up for later, right? The idea of calling into question, because then we have like the falling behind, we have like the existential kind of crisis, I can't reach it, splitting space, jogging alone, right? And this is almost the part that like introduces that feeling of uncertainty, and it both does it like grammatically through like the uncertainty of the grammar, but also through like this if it was sufficient. It then says it might not be, right? And pursuing it might not let me stake my claim on, becoming canonized and seeing the fruits of my labor kind of confirmed, right? Which you almost never will, right? Because like that, so much of that happens after death. You don't really know if you had a legacy until you've been dead for like 100 years. But anyway, I see up ahead so many closer to it than I. I am falling behind. Nobody is near me anymore. I see them all feeling the embrace of it. Right? And so this is then like the contemporary geniuses, right? Or the contemporary like best people. It would be like me looking at who are the great living poets of the time. Mary Oliver, is she dead? I think she died. Who are some good? Sharon Olds, she's still alive. Looking at a person like that, and being like, well, these people are so much closer to it, right? These people are so much closer to like fame and canonization than me. So I'm like hopeless, right? And I'm never gonna reach this thing. I also feel like sometimes as a musician, a lot of musicians would do this. I tended to avoid it, but people would look at like the child prodigy types, where it'd be like, look at this video of like a 5-year-old playing like Liszt and like tearing up like, I mean, I don't think a 5-year-old can play Liszt. They don't really have the hand span. Maybe Chopin's a little more, or Mozart. I don't know. But it's like this prodigy like doing this thing, and people would get all like neurotic about it and be like, well, if this person is already better than me and they're half my age, they're like, I'm a failure, right? I think that's a really bad, I don't think it's a good argument. Like, I don't think it works, because I always think like my answer to this question was always like, I was 18, let's say, and I'm playing saxophone, and I see a video of like a 12-year-old like saxophone prodigy or whatever, and it's like, this person is 12, right? By the time they are 18, there are so many things that could happen that could lead this person to like quit, right? This person could just die. As gruesome as that is, this person could burn out, as like young prodigies often do, right? This person might not make it to 18 as an artist, right? So I think this comparison's pretty like moot. And then there's the fact that like your art is your art and you make the best thing you can and other people don't actually matter. But that's kind of what some of this feels like, right? This like comparison to others, contemporaries, and being like, I suck, I'm not good enough. You know, there's so many people ahead of me, or people who seem like they're ahead of me. And it's fascinating, right, that this idea of falling behind is so wrapped up in the notion of perfectionism, right? Because, like, the greatest fear of the perfectionist is to be imperfect, is to fall behind, right? The ambitious person never wants to be surpassed. And so I think what happens is the mind then constructs threats, right? Threats to the ambition, threats to the perfection, so that you can like continually have something to overcome, and it continues to like drive this thing and reinforce that like cycle. Um, so I like this. I always felt like I was falling behind as a young perfectionist. For these ambition type things, there's also the reading of these as sort of romantic courtship archetypes. If you are the best, then a mate will want you. Yeah, it's like incels, right? Um, where there's the idea of like the alpha Chad omega male who gets all of the women, right? It's like the chart that they have. I think the chart's really funny. You have like the 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, right? Like the attractiveness ratings. And one is men and one is women. And a man who's a 1 can only get a 1, but a man who is a 2 can get like a 1 or a 2, and then the man who's a 10, right, like according to the incel, gets all the women and takes away all the women from the low value man, or whatever this chart is. Um yeah, and I think people like tweak the fuck out about that because obviously like this chart exists. So you know, all the things in between. I'm not going to fill in the whole thing. But yeah, I think this pursuit could also be like love itself in a way, right? To sort of like make it in this very human way of like accomplishing love. Uh, but or it could just be similar to love, right? Romantic courtship, winning. But I think it pretty quickly falls apart for love because it's not really how love works in terms of, you know, winning other people. Uh, we're not like birds doing like flamboyant mating dances. I mean, maybe we kind of are, but yeah, we're pretty animal. But that's a good and interesting point for sure. I like that sort of tangential reading. The farther away, the faster that they escape my dreams, the faster that they split the region between me and it. The faster that these other people, escape my dreams, the faster that they split the region between me and it. I like this, them escaping my dreams, as if like someone's achievement is more than I will ever be able to dream to achieve. And so like they are so far ahead of me, right? That like I can only ever even like dream of being this far. And like this person's like up here, or like way the fuck like out here, or like the next person is like exponentially goddamn farther, right? And I'm like, I can only even imagine myself getting that far. So I like that line. That's how it feels, right? And it's like almost as if these people who are better have greater velocity, right? According to the graph, like these people who are better are getting better faster than I'm getting better, and like accelerating more if we're using like physics and math, right? So then it's like, right, faster they split the region, the gap, right? And if you take, I'm going in this direction and I'm going at a speed of 5, and someone else is going in this direction, but they're going at a speed of 9, then they're going to get ahead of me and it's going to like have this gap. But then let's say that like a person who is at 5 kind of like accelerates at a rate like I don't know of like 20% of whatever they're like going at. And then this person's also accelerating at the same rate. But because they have like a bigger starting number, they have a bigger base of knowledge, they have more skill, they improve faster than me. And then like the gap widens at an increasingly increasing rate, right? Uh so that's kind of I think like the perfection the perspective being outlined, right? I always kind of felt bad for the people that thought this way, mostly because it's such a deeply embedded insecurity that has literally developed into sort of psychosis. Oh yeah, and it developed into a very real psychosis for me, um, personally, and it sounds like for Wombat as well. I had that belief for a while, especially in middle school. I was a hashtag gifted child, and my intelligence became my only personality trait because I was so consistently praised for it. I grew out of that in high school, thank God. I was I did not grow out of it until college, until basically like 2 years ago when I crashed out so hard, or like 2.5, 3 years ago, when I crashed out so hard that I had like no choice to like keep viewing myself that way. Um, and now I don't. And now I understand that comparison and perfection are not very useful. I'm still ambitious, right? The beautiful thing is like the former gifted child can still have like that immense ambition to improve. Uh, and like practicing saxophone for like 3 hours a day for like a year straight without fail teaches you something about discipline, right? That I think has transferred very well to my poetry. But yeah, it was bad for the health, for the mental. Hashtag gifted dudes who crashed. Yeah. The farther away, the faster that they escape my dreams, the faster that they split the region between me and it. With nobody left within my gaze toward it, I jogged alone, heaving. And I think this is that feeling of like burning out. Like what happens when there's like nothing left to chase, or you feel like you can't improve or pass anyone? Because at a certain point there's also no one to pass, right? As we like take these pursuits of knowledge, let's say we pursue poetry, right? And everyone's pursuing poetry who's a poet in their own way. And maybe like one person gets really good at like slam poetry, and one person gets good at, I don't know, let's say analysis and teaching poetry. One person gets really good at like writing like verse. One person gets really good at writing, comedic poems. One person gets really good at like visual and concrete poetry, right? As people start to become like experts, they end up branching out into like more specific paths, right? And it's almost like the person on this path like fails to acknowledge that like uh everyone kind of ends up on these like deferring like little like side routes, right? And branching paths, right? As if it's rather than like rivers that all come together as they go to the sea, right? Like tributaries kind of come together and end up, flowing out into the ocean, right? It's almost like in reverse, right? Or maybe everyone starts with the same thing of like getting basic knowledge about life. But as you start to become more expert about things, everyone branches off in their own way. Um, so it ends up being that often for a lot of people, like once you get really good at something so specific, there's no one left to see, right? There's no one left to pursue because you found something that's yours, right? And I think like one has to be ready for that or they will crash out and fail, right? Because like I'm a poet, but I'm a poet who streams on Twitch, right? Poetry on Twitch. And I am the only person who does this, right? Which means no matter how much like perfectionist impulse there is in me, there's no one to look at and compare myself to. And I think this is a really great place to be as an artist, right? You want to get to a point where you are the only one you can see in a way. Um, right? Because then the realization is this, right? I jogged alone, heaving through the haze. Was this what I was worth? To be left behind, struggling in last place? Was this the fate befitting my mind, not passing a single person in this race? I stopped running and turned around away from it. I sought to see how much distance I crossed for naught. I saw in the distance, along my past path, miles behind me, a dense cloud, hundreds, thousands, millions walking, belonging to it. And I love this, like, it's a sprint, not a marathon, right? Like, because I feel like oftentimes the phrase is more like, right, it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? It's a slow thing that takes a long time. You can't, like, go fast and burn yourself out. But then there are these people who end up, like, seeing life and treating it like a sprint and realizing that, like, yeah, you've outrun a lot of people, right? And now what do you do? It's an interesting question at the end of this poem of, like, what this person does next, but they probably keep running, because they have strong legs at that point. I was full on Ben Shapiro plus Steven Crowder alt-right incel. Wow. Luckily I had a socialist furry roommate in high school that debated me out of my toxic views. I'm thankful that they didn't just give up on me. Yeah, props to the socialist furry. We need more of those in the world. I would love to have a socialist furry roommate. Ironically, I was never praised for my intelligence, but I was praised for my art. So I ended up putting all my effort into learning art. I ended up being burned out from art for like 5 years. Yeah, it's the same principle. It's any pursuit, right? That happens that way. It can be math and science. It can be art. It can be, whatever. Pursuit is always kind of a dangerous thing if you don't do it for the right reasons. If I had dealt with it in high school, I probably wouldn't have crashed out in college. Yep, same. The earlier you deal with these things, the less hard they cause you to crash out when you do crash out. You will crash out if you live your life like the person in this poem, right? When I was in middle school, I would look for games that nobody played so I could get the world record speed run. I was not in a good place. Yeah, that's really funny. Speedrunning games that no one plays to say you got the world record. I only got attention for being good at school or being bad at life. There was no in between. Yeah, that was quite hard. Seems like my stream is a landing place for burnt out gifted people. I was the goofy guy who kept being underestimated, so I started trying harder and found I'm actually good at a lot of stuff. Then other people noticed, and I became the gifted guy no one talked to because he was so focused on school and never smiled or talked ever. Yeah. It's unfortunate that also there's like this conception that like to be smart you have to be like stoic and you can't have fun in knowledge. I think that's something that school contributes to is like there's this idea that you can't have fun as you learn. It can't be fun to learn because it's like an obligation. And so someone who is good at it is like this stoic, focused, emotionless individual who hates the world. And that's such a harmful notion. Yeah. So it's funny. The thing that inspired me to write this poem is finding that my basic Excel knowledge was way above most adults know how to do. I was the office spreadsheet wizard because I could do conditional formatting. Right, yeah. That's really funny, right? This idea of just having like this aptitude, or like some intuitive like a like knowledge. I love spreadsheets. I love conditionals and doing fun things on spreadsheets. We're going to take a quick break because I really have to go to the bathroom. But we'll come back to this poem a little bit more and to this discussion. And so stand up, drink water, do something kind for your mind and body. Stop looking at the screen. Don't watch the ads. Move if you're able. All of that stuff. And we'll be back in just a few minutes. Yeah. Welcome back. Hello. And welcome back. We are still reading a poem by Furry Combat Wombat. Inspired by the shock of going from college back to the workforce. It is a sprint, not a marathon. That's a very funny inspiration for this poem, and it makes sense. But it's interesting how sometimes in life it's like the very little experiences, right, that allow us to like reflect on these very like large and fundamental ideas. I think there's something very beautiful about that. But let's read the whole poem again. I'm not sure I have like all that much more to talk about with it, but maybe there are questions. So if people can think of questions, if any, or comments about the poem as I read it through for this reading. It is a sprint, not a marathon. From the moment my ears could discern names among sounds, I heard stories, legends of those who had made it. What is it? What is the it that beckons pursuit, that forces one beyond survival like some forbidden but required fruit? I ran, sprinted, From the moment I could form words and thoughts of my own, divorced from what I'd heard before. I saw my goal. I saw it on the horizon. I followed it as if it preached from the pulpit, made myself its pawn. I grew closer and closer. My aptitude grew and grew, my appetite still unsatiated through and through. But as I closed the gap with it grew farther, hyperbolic space, it ever receding as I chase. I had to find it. I had to chase it. I had to ensure my life had a place in it, that my name would not be erased if it was sufficient to stake my claim on history, art, culture, fame. I see up ahead. So many. Closer to it than I am falling behind. Nobody is near me anymore. I see them all feeling the embrace of it. The farther away, the faster that they escape my dreams, the faster that they split the region between me and it. With nobody left, within my gaze toward it, I jogged alone, heaving through the haze. Was this what I was worth, to be left behind, struggling in last place? Was this the fate befitting my mind, not passing a single person in this race? I stopped running and turned around away from it. I sought to see how much distance I crossed for naught. I saw in the distance, along my past path, miles behind me, a dense cloud of hundreds, thousands, millions, walking, belonging to it. It's a sprint, not a marathon, by Furry Combat Wombat. Did you have any other questions or thoughts or things about this poem, Wombat? Or if anyone else has more thoughts or stories about being burnt out and gifted children or whatever, that's also more than welcome to talk about. I feel like, so it's interesting. I feel like this notion of perfection is something that I'm really like very presently processing. So I'm glad I read this poem. But I think like this idea of perfection, right, and some pursuit has led me throughout my life to like immense feelings of like self-hatred, right? Drowning Devil mentioned like the idea of like a kind of psychosis about it, right? But like self-hatred and like shame that I feel like has been with me since I was like probably like 6 years old. You know, this kind of idea in the poem of like, since I could form words that were distinct from like other people's thoughts. And I feel like it is only like now at like 22 that I'm like really actually doing like the work to like truly unpack that stuff. Like I got over like the compulsive perfection like 3 years ago, you know, 3 years ago. And but like now I'm finally like trying to answer that question, I think, for myself of like, well, you get to the end and you look back and you realize like it's not a race really, and it doesn't, like, none of that matters, and we're all moving toward it belonging, right? I love this. I love that word at the end, belonging, right? Everyone's chasing, everyone's going after, everyone's like separate from it. And then you realize at the end that like if it is history and it is the canon and it is like the whole sum of human knowledge, then that's so beautiful. The answer that this poem kind of gives is that like everyone is like a necessary part of this thing, right? By this word belonging. Right? That's a beautiful way to end this poem. Sorry, but that was a distraction. I was saying like I feel like it was a few years ago that I like stopped running and turned around and then was sort of floundering on this question of like, well, now what do I do? You know, how do I go forward? Right? And that's kind of what I asked at the end, like, what does this person do next? And it's nice because I feel like I personally am finally kind of at this point, finding answers to these questions for myself, which is really nice. And I think Stream is a part of that, right? Stream is one of these things that I get to pursue. It's interesting. There are, in a sense, two types of perfection: cardinal, perfection against a standard, or ordinal, perfection by comparison, both of which consume people. Yeah, okay, so you have like cardinal perfection. That's interesting. I haven't heard of it this way. So cardinal is like a sort of arbitrary standard, right? Like if we reach this point, it is like perfect. And then there's ordinal, which is like relative or comparative, right, to other people. And you can be perfect by being better than everyone, right? Which is like pretty flawed because you just can't do that. And there's so many people, and there will always kind of be someone to measure yourself against. And then cardinal as to be like perfect, like without flaw, right? Without flaw. And I actually, so like, I feel like I've done both of these in my life, and I used to be more of this, and then I ended up falling into like the cardinal, like, well, I'm not going to compare myself, but I still want to be perfect, and I still want to do everything right, and I still want to like, make the best art possible, or like not even make the best art possible, make perfect art. And then now I think I'm in the spot that like this notion of perfect is kind of useful because it exists in my mind and it's existed all my life as this like object out here on the horizon, right? But I think personally I've accepted that like this thing is never to be reached, but to have an ideal to move toward means to always incrementally grow and get better, right? And I think that could be quite useful. Someone put it the other day in the terms of the scientific method, right? The scientific method seeks out like a capital T truth about the world, but it also acknowledges that it can't actually really get that. So it takes all these incremental steps through like a process to get closer and closer and closer and closer and closer to truth, right? But it never actually can reach that like perfect, complete knowledge. And it's always like with the understanding that, this pursuit can be revised and can be changed and is not like final. And I think that's a very beautiful idea to apply to like art as well, as like a sort of scientific method of growth and development without a need for perfection, just to discover, right? When I was younger, I would ask myself, do I have meaning if for everything I do there exists someone better than me at that? If I am not the best at any one thing, do I matter? I got such a high when I was the best warlock on a World of Warcraft server once, but it was not a healthy way to think. Ended up trying everything and quitting when I wasn't already amazing at it, chasing the one thing that I could be best at. Yeah, right. If your standard for yourself is the best, that's very dissonant with being a beginner, right? And beginners necessarily suck at stuff usually, and like that's not their fault. They're young, or they're beginning. You don't have to be young to be a beginner. I think that's a very important idea, and I think something central to my stream, right, is like anyone can learn poetry at any time, and be a beginner. You just have to accept the beginnerness, and that you're like going to be floundering around in scary emotions, right? But if you just want to be the best, then like this is very, very hard process to occupy. So yeah, that's a very real thing. And I think I've done the same. I spent a lot of my life like trying things and getting like pretty good pretty quickly, sort of existing on like this comfortable part of the logarithmic curve, And then as soon as the returns started to diminish, I would quit, right? And I had a threshold where I'm like, oh, now it actually gets hard, right? There's the idea of the learning curve where like a lot of things, it's pretty easy. So if we have like effort and skill, it's pretty easy, I think, to get like, you know, like the basic skills about something, right? If you learn like the basics of drawing, you'll be better than like 50% of people at drawing just by like doing that much. But then like it starts to take much more effort, right, to get much less skill and then to get better than 75% of people. It's like the bell curve, right? A bell curve, we have, you know, 50% of people on either side of this thing, right? And it doesn't actually take that much usually to get to the middle of the bell curve, but it gets harder and harder and harder and harder once you go this way. Lots of graphs today. I love graphs. I feel like my mind gets stuck on finding the truth of a situation. With the past few months, my brain has gotten stuck on statistics. That statistically everything has happened at some point, and that thing can react differently based on something I have no control over. It's a terrifying thing to get stuck in. Okay, hold on. This is an interesting idea. I want to make sure I read it right. Past few months, my brain has gotten stuck on statistics. That statistically everything has happened at some point. So, do you mean like the idea that sort of like nothing is new? Like you can't have new thoughts or something? And that things can react differently based off something I have no control over. Like a butterfly effect. Like there's all these little forces in the world that can like nudge things in unexpected directions. Yeah, I mean the world like statistically is a terrifying place, right? Like there's always this low chance that like a car just hits you and you die, right? Or like a plane crashes in your house and like bam, it's over, you know? And there's all these like tiny little minute threats that are like statistically improbable but could happen, you know. I think the antidote to that maybe is to just live in the reality of what you have. Statistics is only ever like an inaccurate pointing toward the future, right? And any pointing toward the future is inaccurate because we just cannot know, right? In an accurate future. And uh living in the moment, right? Those statistical possibilities, right, whether or not they could come to pass, haven't come yet. And that can at least be a comfort. Now, if life sucks, then life sucks, but that's a different problem. That's a much easier problem to deal with, I think. Mostly just catastrophizing. Yeah, especially and like the world, right? There's a lot of like catastrophe in the world, and there's a lot of like sort of logical reason to catastrophize. Um, and maybe there's that, right? We can be logical and look at the world and say like the world is shit and like the environment is like collapsing um and like fascism is rising across the world and like uh uh there's like genocide happening and like I don't know what other catastrophes are going on, right? But those are some things. The environment's a big one for me. Like that's really bad. Like we're gonna run out of water, you know? Like there's gonna be like people having wars over it, like probably in our lifetime, right? Uh and this is all the logic, right? And you can't really argue with this stuff because it's like real. Um but we can have like our emotions and our will, and we can also be like there are beautiful things in my life, there are like people who are close to me and matter, right? I can find like love and I can like support people and I can even like have will and willpower like against these bad things, and like this allows me to engage with this logical pain in like a satisfactory emotional way. This is just me expanding upon the quote that I heard only a few days ago from someone else in chat, which was from Gramsci, philosopher of Marxism. Gramsci. Uh, Pessimism of the logic, optimism of the will, right? You can always have optimism if you have will and hope and like emotion and feeling and love, right? And pretty much you have to be pessimistic if you look at the world logically. But then like this will and this emotion and this stuff can act as the counterbalance to the catastrophizing. Because you can't logic away like the horrifying reality of the world, but you can love the beautiful things in it, and even find the beauty in relation to those things. Welcome in, Thunder God Hulk. Hello. You're late? There's no late. This classroom does not have a tardy policy. Wombat, you say, yeah, and it's like, I had this ingrained insecurity of being the generic brand of whatever I'm doing that is cheaper and more convenient for those around me, but a lesser result than flying the best person in the world to wherever something needed to get done. Yeah, I think there's this like there's this fear that a lot of people have of being like generic, of being like less valuable, of not being the most valuable. I mean, I think maybe there's like a capitalism thing that happens here where like we live in a world of value and like particularly the extraction of value. And if you're someone who has more value to be extracted by the world, then like you get rewarded for that very much like economically. Sort of. I mean, it's often those, or if you can extract value from things. Actually, if you're someone, a lot of people have a lot of value, and then their value gets extracted by people with more power, and then they are left with nothing. That's like a person who works a job. And then capitalism values like you being a person who can see, valuable things in the world and be able to extract that for yourself, which I think plays into those kinds of mindsets or whatever. So yeah. I remember asking if your iPad was a whole TV because I thought you were just dragging it around and not swiping it. Oh, yeah, giant screen moving around. No, that'd be kind of cool. Uh, but iPad, I can zoom in and out. This thing's great. I love the iPad. This works so well. Other than it looks kind of funky, but it doesn't totally matter. Not to mention the first stanza. Most celebrities are rich. Yeah, right. Legends, those who made it. And there's this fact of like, it's so much easier for people who are wealthy already to make it, right? There's like nepotism. Like people on this race toward it, some people start here and some people start here, right? Who's like like LeBron's kid. I mean, he's a good basketball player, right? But like he has all this advantage and starts much closer to that possibility than like some kid from like, I don't know, from like the streets of Philadelphia, and so effort, doesn't entirely pay off in this world. And that's the hard thing about framing it this way is like the perfectionist might think like I can just do more and I can win. And like that's not always the case. I mean, you can get like the ultra perfectionist kind of like ultra traumatized like autists of the world like Elon Musk, right? Like and he like where like I don't know, but he was like pretty like privileged. He was like a white guy in South Africa. Um yeah, no. A lot of people start here, right? That's a way more privileged start than like someone just born in like who knows where, some like outskirt province of China that's like rural. The world's first fake trillionaire, yeah. But that's just like, yeah, the extraction of value. And I think like if you're like fucked up enough to be okay with your entire life being based on the extraction of capital value from other people, like I guess you can have like your fake $1 trillion, but that's a really miserable life. And that's why they're miserable, weird, like inhuman people, the Zuckerbergs and Musks and Bezos, because you need to have a certain kind of like fucked up mind to see everything in the world as something to extract money from, right? And even them, they're just as controlled by kind of these capitalistic forces as anyone. Um, Such a great horror, to need to be seen, but not want to be perceived. I was talking about that with my friend last night. The idea of being seen. Um, yeah, unfortunately, you need to be perceived to be seen, and that's a tricky thing, but it's good for you. What iPad am I using? Might use it for digital drawing. This is an iPad. I've had it for like, I think I've had this iPad for like 7 years or something. High key, because I got it originally for like music, because Fourscore, where's Fourscore? Um, to to do music on, because then to do like page turns and stuff, you can just like tap. Um, and I have all my old like we were talking about saxophone today, so we can look at my old saxophone music. Uh, Interesting. Let me play the Creston. That one's in Russian. Yeah, so I got this to be able to do music, and but it's an iPad Pro, so it's like the really big one. Like this is a big ass iPad. So it is great for drawing, and I did do like some digital art for some time. I kind of like burnt out on it, but I was doing some like still life studies and things, which this was so like perfectionistic of me. I just was like, oh, I'm just gonna like learn still lifes with light and shadow because I want to know how to draw, and I was having no fun doing this, and it like genuinely made me miserable. um, I improved very quickly, right? That one's pretty bad. Yeah, so iPad is nice, but it's it's very old, but it still works great. And this application, I'm just using like a note taking app called, I don't know what this one is, Microsoft OneNote. Microsoft, sponsor my stream. Give me lots of money to use your app on my screen. Anyway, I have to run. Going to with my family to Hibachi. Fuck yeah, enjoy Hibachi, and thank you so much for sending this poem, Wombat. I think we're pretty much done talking about it, so that's good timing. Yeah, but anyway, I think this is an iPad Pro from like from like 2020 or something. I don't exactly remember when I got it. Maybe I got it in like 2021. Maybe it's 5 years old. That sounds about right. Uh, it's good that I've gotten good use out of it, and I can still use it for stuff. Okay, to finish up this poem that we're reading, this is A Sprint, Not a Marathon by Furry Combat Wombat. Oh, maybe it got phased out by now. Yeah, and now they have like the new fancy iPad Pros or whatever, right? That are like probably like way more expensive than this one ever was. I think I was able to save up for this one. Oh, okay. That helps me know when I bought it because I saved up for it with all my part-time money from working at a music store in a repair shop cleaning instruments. Um, so yeah, it would have been around COVID 2021. You can buy these things used though, right? I think it like you can look for like a 2022 or even like a 2024, right? Will probably be like way cheaper than whatever is like the newest 2027 iPad Pro, basically a fucking computer, like costs you like 4 grand. Um, like probably look for one of these older ones, like secondhand, and you can probably like get a pretty decent drawing tablet And then this application Procreate that I was showing a second ago is like a really great drawing application. So it's a good, and then you just get like the Apple Pencil, and it has like, you can like tap it to like change your pencil tool, which is cool. I don't know. It works great. Okay, here's a sprint, not a marathon. To finish up this poem. It is a sprint, not a marathon. From the moment my ears could discern names among sounds, I heard stories, legends of those who had made it. What is it? What is the it that beckons pursuit, that forces one beyond survival, like some forbidden but required fruit? I ran, sprinted, from the moment I could form words and thoughts of my own, divorced from what I heard before. I saw my goal. I saw it on the horizon. I followed it as if it preached from the pulpit, made myself its pawn. I grew closer and closer. My aptitude grew and grew, my appetite still unsatiated through and through. But as I closed the gap with it, it grew farther, hyperbolic space, it ever receding as I chase. I had to find it. I had to choked on my spit, like an inhaled. I had to chase it. I had to ensure my life had a place in it, that my name would not be erased if it was sufficient to stake my claim on history, art, culture, fame. I see up ahead, so many closer to it than I. I am falling behind. Nobody is near me anymore. I see them all feeling the embrace of it. The farther away, the faster that they escape my dreams, the faster that they split the region between me and it. With nobody left, within my gaze, toward it I jogged alone, heaving through the haze. Was this what I was worth? To be left behind? Struggling in last place? Was this the fate befitting my mind? Not passing a single person in this race? I stopped running and turned around. Away from it, I sought to see how much distance I crossed for naught. I saw in the distance, along my past path, miles behind me, a dense cloud of hundreds, thousands, millions walking, belonging to it. It is a sprint, not a marathon, by Furry Combat Wombat. I know you just left, but thank you so much for submitting it to this stream. Lovely, lovely poem, lovely work. And as always, as it goes for everyone, a joy to read. So thank you. I'll stop asking questions so you can finish with the poetry, Lamau. Yeah, sometimes we have to, like, for just a moment, get back on the rails and actually lock in and, like, do something on this stream. I'm very easily distracted. All right. Cool. That was a really good poem. And that was a good conversation too about perfectionism and comparison. I feel like that's always good stuff to talk about in artist spaces, because lots of artists fall prey to this idea and this feeling of needing to be the best or needing to be perfect, and that's simply not the case. You just have to be you. Just have to be you, going in your special little personal direction. And y'all are redeeming me next. I think we will certainly do another poem here on stream. What did I say? Did I say earlier that I was like, who still has things submitted? I will ask the question, who is in chat right now that has things submitted for me to read? Still Bookworm, you're still around. Drowning Devil, Nikki, gotcha. Did I say I was going to read Bookworm and Wombat? I think that's what I said, right? I'm pretty sure I'm reading Bookworm next. Um, and then yeah, you're here-ish. Yeah, we'll get back to more Nikki poetry eventually, and same for Callie. Um, so Bookworm, you have Tears, and you have the other one, Mirage. That's what I see of your submission. Is there one of those that you would prefer uh me read? I did say Bookworm. Okay. Is either of those poems more your preference that I go in and talk about? Because I can definitely defer to your choice. Ooh, and you have questions added in your submission. That makes me so happy. I love I love it. I like Mirage more for the rhythm, and Tears more for the metaphors. Um, I think since we were talking about this big metaphor of the it, I think I'm gonna stick with that metaphorical feeling, and we'll read Tears. Uh, that seems like a good approach. I like metaphors. Those are a those are a good thing. Oh, and one of your questions is, does the anthropomorphism of the tears serve the poem? And that's interesting because just yesterday we were talking about the idea of anthropomorphization in poetry. And that's something that I feel like has been on my mind. I love looking at these afterwards sometimes. This one's so beautiful with all the charts and colors and shapes. This one's great. We were talking about anthropomorphism like just yesterday on stream with the poem from Floral Foxes. So that's exciting that you're directly asking about the notion of anthropomorphization. Big fucking word. But now talking about it 2 days in a row, I feel like I've got the word down, you know? Anthropomorphism or how many letters is that? Anthropomorphization. 5, 10, 15. It's like 20 letters in a word. That's crazy. Some people don't write like text messages or sentences with more than like 20 letters in them. I mean, that's usually me. Okay, we have this poem called Tears. And we have 3 questions. 3 questions. Does the anthropomorphization serve this poem? Is it consistent? Oh, the anthropomorphism of the tears. Okay, so we're making the tears human-like. Does having a rhyme in the last stanza pull you out? Fall and all. What feelings do you have after having read the whole thing? Cool. These are great questions to keep in mind as we read. But to have any thought on them, we must read. So here's Tears. And of course, if you have any more questions along the way, Bookworm, feel free to ask them. And if anyone else has questions along the way, they are more than welcome, and chat is always welcome to give their analysis, comments, thoughts on the poem. I'm sure the poet submitting would appreciate those things, so long as you're kind. But y'all are kind. Tears. That's tears. Definitely tears. That is the poem. That's funny. Good start. Tears form at the edges of my eyes. Okay, that would kind of be like a cool poem, like to have like a poem that seems like it's about tears, but really be writing about tears and like the face like ripping open, right? And it's like body horror, and it's like grief, and it's like my face is being ripped open by the sorrow of loss or something. That'd be a great idea. I love double meanings in words/phrases. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, and that is a, what is that called? A homophone, I think. Homophone is in same, like homosexual. Phone is in sound. Two words that sound the same. Oh, maybe that's homophone is like there and there, right? This one's something else. Because that's one word that can have two different sounds, but the same word on the page. So it's not homophonic because they're different sounds. Does anyone know what that's called? The vocabulary word. English teachers in my chat maybe. Um, they're cool either way. I feel like some teacher must have told me what the word for that was in like fourth grade or something. Okay, let's actually read the poem. Tears. Tears form at the edges of my eyes. They watch you feel warm in that house of yours, wondering what it feels like to live the way you do. Tears drip their way past my nose, something I see every second of every day. I've blocked it out, but still they traverse the planes of my skin, clinging on until gravity pulls them away. Tears fall from my face into a downward spiral. A drop, a stream, a torrential current, forgetting what it feels like to be alone. Tears hit the fabric of my shirt. Each one exists for only a second longer, fading away into the air around. They only lived for but a moment. They only knew myself in the fall. At the end, though, at least they were known by someone. Anyone at all. Tears. So I like that this poem has like a little bit of a narrative going on, right? We have like a very singular, right, specific image that kind of develops throughout the poem, right? And we have the tears form, and then the tears kind of drip down, and then the tears fall down from my face, and then the tears hit my shirt, and then the tears are gone, and like that's kind of our narrative progression of the poem. And that gives us, kind of like a nice grounding of story to explore, some of these like these ideas, just I think the thought of the tears and the sadness and all of what's going on here. I think that works quite well, right? And kind of like using those at the beginning of each stanza, right, is pretty solid. It gives this feeling like this poem, I think, a feeling of like steadiness, right? At least on a first read, kind of watching that develop and fall down, right? And they're just like happening. They're going. Maybe they're just, we have like the tears, kind of downward spiral torrential current, right? It's I think by framing it in a story, you can get this like expectation almost that like the next things are going to keep coming. It keeps going, right? It like progresses. And I think maybe that helps with the feeling of sort of the continuity of like the tears themselves, right? As we call it, a torrential current, as they seem to just keep forming, right? So what feeling do you have after reading the whole thing? The first thing is like, a steadiness from this device, but that's a very like intellectual kind of feeling, and I don't think I've dug into all the feels of this poem quite yet. I think it's very beautiful, right, to watch these little delicate tears kind of trace down the face. And it's interesting. They feel kind of like small at the beginning, right? They watch you, as if we can think of the tears as like a thing with thought, right? This is our anthropomorphization. Anthropomorphization, to give human qualities. Anthropos. Morphization, to become, to give human qualities to, right? Ization, right? To turn something in. Mechanization, to become mechanical. So anthropomorphization, to give human qualities to tears, right? And in that case, that is the tears are watching you, as though the tears are human and have feeling and have thoughts, right? But they start kind of very small like this, right? And then they drip their way past, and then they kind of like traverse the planes of my skin. And it kind of feels like bigger, right? Like this poem kind of expands as it goes on. And then they become a stream, a torrential current. And I like this imagery, right? We have like the plains and the current, the stream, right, cutting across the plains. So it's almost like we're creating like this map, like this world. Even, we have a house on the plains with a stream going by it, right? And then we come back, to the tears being small, hitting my shirt, dissolving away, kind of being nothing. And then back to this like abstract, they only lived for a moment. And I like that. So this poem has like a push and a pull in a way, where it expands into this center point of maybe what feels like most tension. Tears fall from my face into a downward spiral, right? A pretty like tense negative connotation to be downward spiraling. That's like has a lot of its own like connotations and meaning. A drop, a stream, a torrential current, right? So this progression, drop, stream, current, that we kind of have here. Forgetting what it feels like to be alone. And then, right, tears hit the fabric of my shirt. Each one exists only for only a second longer, fading away into the air around. So now we're like slowing down. They only live for but a moment. They only knew myself in the fall. At the end, though, at least they were known by someone, anyone at all. And it just kind of like wraps up quite nicely and quite like conclusively. I think you sort of ask about the rhyme, and does it pull you out? I don't think it pulls me out, but I think it gives the effect of like when we end with fall and all, and it's like by someone, anyone at all, it means the poem really like lands very conclusively, right? And maybe that's why I feel like the steadiness or like a security in this poem, even though it's kind of sad, there's like maybe a little bit of a feeling of like acceptance in like the bittersweet kind of, I'm crying and it's sad, but like there's beauty here and there's acceptance. And I think that rhyme contributes to this, right? They only knew myself and the fall. At the end, though, at least they were known. And even we have this like though known, which almost sets up like an A, B, B, A rhyme scheme kind of within the line. By anyone, by someone, anyone at all. And we could imagine, just taking away this at all, right? They only lived for but a moment. They only knew myself in the fall. At the end, though, at least they were known by someone, anyone. And you could even say anyone for a moment, right? Or whatever. But it's like it doesn't have that same like conclusiveness to it. And I think you also have like moment and known. So you sort of like set up kind of like a very like a lot of rhyme actually going on here, more so than just this rhyme. And I think it gives it a very like subdued pulling back in at the end of this poem, where like at the beginning we're like streaming tears and whatever, and we do have some rhyme, right? This isn't like out of nowhere. We have like day and away in that stanza, right? Tears drip their way past my nose, something I see every second of every day. I've blocked it out, but they still traverse the plains of my skin, clinging on until gravity pulls them away. Right? And this kind of has like a finality to it in a way as well, where like they leave the face, they are pulled down, they are like left into this sort of space of like freedom and falling and whatever. And so like I think, this almost calls back to this stanza in a nice way, where like this concludes the first section, and then we have like this climactic downward spiral fall, and then we have this like slight resolution, and then we have like the full conclusion, which calls back to this like temporary conclusion before like the big moment, right? The turning point. So I think that like seems to me to work pretty well from like an aesthetic and like technical perspective. I'm gonna read the poem again. And I'm gonna drink some water. That's useful. Tears form at the edges of my eyes. They watch you feel warm in that house of yours, wondering what it feels like to live the way you do. Tears drip their way past my nose, something I see every second of every day. I've blocked it out, but still they traverse the planes of my skin, clinging on until gravity pulls them away. Tears fall from my face into a downward spiral, a drop, a stream, a torrential current, forgetting what it feels like to be alone. Tears hit the fabric of my shirt. Each one exists for only a second longer, fading away into the air around. They only lived for but a moment. They only knew myself in the fall. At the end, though, at least they were known by someone, anyone, at all. So you have this question about anthropomorphism of the tears. And it's a great question. You ask, is it consistent? My answer to is it consistent to me is no. And I will start with this line. This is like, I think, one of my favorite lines in the poem, really. They watch you feel warm in that house of yours, wondering what it feels like to live the way you do. It does a couple things, right? The tears are maybe kind of like made to be cold against you feeling warm, or I feel cold and alone, wondering what it feels like. But the tears are watching, right? And this to me is like the core of anthropomorphism, right? An object that like cannot do this thing, cannot do the thing, this human thing, right? Doing the thing. And that is what's happening here, right? The tears are seeing. Tears do not see. And it does this thing where like the tears are experiencing the world for me, which is like, it means like it's as though I am experiencing the world through my tears, which is very cool. The idea that we would like see the world through our emotions and they would become something alive enough to kind of see for us or control us in a way. I think that's a really wonderful notion. But then we follow that lineup with something much less anthropomorphic, right? Tears drip their way past my nose, right? And I think when we present the tears as dripping, right? Dripping is a non-human action, right? Dripping is a tears kind of action. And I think it takes us away from the feeling of the tears being very human, being very anthropomorphized. We get back later and we have like, they traverse the planes of my skin, right? And if the tears race, that's a little closer, right? Because they, like, humans run and we race and that kind of thing. And like traverse, I think, right? I can read this both ways, right? Traversing is something that people do. We like walk, and I like the idea of the tears like walking across the plains, right? Thinking of them like kind of taking this almost like stroll through this meadow, right? And then that feels very much like watching through, like watching you feel warm in the house, walking in these plains, you know, like being in this little like almost like pastoral world of my face, right? And then not only that, you're doing this like inverse anthropomorphization where the human face becomes something non-human, right? So it becomes like a full reversal. And I think that move is really cool. But here's the thing. So when we use like race is better than drip in terms of accomplishing anthropomorphization. Anthropomorphization is about the tears doing human things, right? And humans don't drip unless they're extremely fashionable, right? But humans can race, right? So, but the thing is, racing is a term that both tears and humans can do. So I would say it's kind of like a partial anthropomorphization, right? I'm going to draw this out. Right? Anthropomorphization. There are things that humans can do, right? There are things that tears can do, right? And then there are things that both of these can do, right? Tears can drip, right? Like we used in this poem. Tears can, I don't know, I guess they form, right? We use that in our poem. They, like, fall from my face in this way. This kind of fall is pretty much something only tears can do. Now, humans can fall in love, maybe. So there is this, like, other kind of fall, right? Through, like, double meanings, right? Humans can see, right? Both can traverse. Both can race, right? You have tears hit the fabric of my shirt. And I think, like, hit is something both of these can do, right? And like, lived, right? Lived is probably more of a human thing, right? Know, right? The tears knew something. That's a more human thing. Because, like, tears don't know, tears don't live. That's kind of like a thing. They're inanimate objects, right? Each one exists, right? Both of these things, like, exist, but then they, like, fade away into the air. And that's more of, like, a tear thing to do. So just using, like, the verbs, a few of the verbs, like, grabbed from this poem, we are pretty, like, even on the verbs being things that only humans can do, things that only tears can do, and things that both of these things can do, right? And when so I'm going to argue that for anthropomorphization, tears are being fully anthropomorphized to the greatest extent, and that doesn't mean best, it just means the greatest extent of the device, when they are doing things that only humans can do, right? When a tear is doing something that both humans and tears can do, I would say it's kind of like partial anthropomorphization. And then this is going to be like context dependent, right? Where if we set up a bunch of other anthropomorphization, I think we can get away with some like traverse and some race kind of words to like accomplish a mostly full anthropomorphization of the object. But anytime the tear is doing something that only tears can do and humans cannot do, right, then we're pulling away, I think, from the anthropomorphization, right? Because anthropomorphization is to make tears more human. And if you're doing something that humans can't do, like dripping, like humans can drip, I guess, in certain ways, but that's a tear thing. That's a much more tear thing. Or to fade into the air, then it takes away the feeling that these tears are human, and it places them back in their kind of tear nature, right? And I would say, since you're spanning in this poem all of these three different spaces of like the full, the partial, and the non-anthropomorphic, I would say your anthropomorphization, right, is it consistent? Like, probably not here, right? Does it serve the poem is the other question you ask. And I think, like, yes. And for me, because I really like anthropomorphization, I think it serves the poem most when you do it the most. I love the tears watching you feel warm in that house of yours, right? That's, like I said, it's one of my favorite lines. Now, that's my opinion, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean you need to go and change the rest of this into full anthropomorphization. Some people might like the more in-between use of a word like traverse. But I think I might enjoy for this poem, if we want to like lean into the anthropomorphization, like to have them walk the plains of my skin. Because tears cannot walk, right? And so that's kind of my thought on the anthropomorphization, right? Because then we get to the end and it's like, they only knew myself and the fall, right? It's like the tears knew me And the more that the tears are doing all the work in this poem, the less that I sort of exist, me as myself. And then it's about the tears being known, right? And it's sort of not as much about like me being known, but then the tears reflect back in a very poetic way on the me in this poem. So that's kind of my thoughts on that question. For the anthropomorphization. I don't know if you have like further questions on that, having all that being said. I don't think there's necessarily like a perfect right or wrong approach to how you want to go about this, right? Keeping it as is totally fine. But I think I'm a big sucker for like the complete anthropomorphization. So that's just like my opinion. I feel like we can do like a game for this poem, and like we missed it, but take a shot for every time Imogen says anthropomorphization. I think I've said it like 20 times though, so I really appreciate the feedback on the anthropomorphization. I feel like you were really excited to like type that whole word out. I'm having so much fun saying it. It's a great word. On anthropomorphization. What a great word. It's like it's gonna be like stuck in my mouth now, that word, because I've talked about it 2 days in a row. Okay, so that's that. Right. Anthropomorphism of the tears serve the poem. Is it consistent? I think it does serve the poem, right? Because I think it's very cool. And I think like creating this little world inside of it is really neat, right? Is it consistent? Maybe less so, right? But that's okay. We also don't have to be consistent. Although a lot of people like consistency in art. Does having the rhyme on the last stanza pull you out? Answer that. And then what feelings do you have after reading the whole thing? And I feel like I do still want to dive into like the feelings of this poem, because we've talked about a couple of these like technical things, but this is a very feeling kind of poem, right? Tears form at the edges of my eyes. They watch you feel warm in that house of yours, wondering what it feels like to live the way you do. And so I love so much the tears as the things that are seeing, right? Because this to me says like, of course I am crying, right? The tears are forming at the edges of my eyes. And so the way that I see the world, right, is now colored and informed by the fact that I am crying, right? And a way maybe that I like to read this for me is like, I see the world differently because I am crying, and it is as if I am seeing through, right? Through as in through them, but through as in they are seeing on my behalf, the tears, right? And it's like in the same way that if like someone is really like angry and they have a lot of rage, right? They kind of see the world through that rage, or to be like very focused and like tunnel visioned onto a thing. But the idea of like tears and sorrow giving this separate way of like seeing the world is very cool to me. Wondering what it feels like to live the way you do. And I think something that happens is like the anthropomorphization of this poem. I think why I like it is it adds to the separation of the narrator and their own kind of like humanity, right? They're feeling distant and lonely in relation to this other person, right? And it's like, this person doesn't even get to see you feel warm, right? It's as though they have to see it through the tears. So there's this added level of distance, right? Me, the tears, and you. And it's like the tears then exist as this intermediary force. I didn't do a you. Between these things, right? And it adds to this feeling for me of like the division and the farness away from you, right? That I can't get past these tears, and the only way is kind of through them. Tears drip their way past my nose, something I see every second of every day. I've blocked it out. And I like this line, right? That I see every second of every day, I've blocked it out, because then it's like this feeling of not being able to see. It reinforces that imagery of like, I can't see, and so the tears have to do the seeing, right? I wonder if we're making this a landscape, right? Like it's almost like the nose, if the planes of the skin are plains and rolling hills, then the nose is almost like a mountain. I don't know if that's something you would want to like run with, but I love this as a landscape, right? And the nose is kind of this towering, looming mountain that fades into the background through always being there and not really being seen. Um, I see every second of every day, but I've blocked it out. And I think this connects later, right, to the idea of like to be known, to be seen. I think this poem is very visual, and I like the visuality of this poem. I think it's hard to make seeing interesting because like seeing is the sense we use most. Seeing is sort of like the automatic, sense that poets write through. But to frame seeing through this anthropomorphization of another thing that is mine, I think gives such a fresh view on the idea of seeing. And then you're also playing with this like not seeing and like not seeing because it's blocked out. Because right, our nose is in our field of vision. And if you like look down, you can like kind of see your nose. But the brain just like blocks out that the nose is there because it's easier to see without the nose being there. And I think that's a really, really cool like detail and bit of imagery. Traverse the plains of my skin, clinging on until gravity pulls them away. And this is like fascinating, right? Because this blends like this fantastical world with like the plains of my skin, with like this sort of gravity pulls away that doesn't quite fit into this image, right? And it kind of reminds us and pulls us back to the face, which is cool. Um, Tears fall from my face into a downward spiral, a drop, a stream, a torrential current, forgetting what it feels like to be alone. And that's interesting, right? The tears get to forget what it feels like to be alone. The tears get to like join in this current. The tears get to join in this like thing that's in relation to this person and like but again, it like adds a little bit of distance. And we know that the tears are talking about me. I get to kind of forget what it feels like to be alone in a way. But by placing it in the tears, it just adds this really lovely distance from like one's own emotions. And then like tears hit the fabric of my shirt. Um, that's kind of interesting. It almost feels like I think of the image of like two people who are like suffering together, and you'd have like one person clinging to another and like grabbing the fabric of their shirt, right? You have hit, but that's almost like the image that I want to associate with it here. And then it becomes this like communal suffering of me and the tears, right? Which, each one exists only for a second longer, fading away into the air around. But it's just these like moments of being able to be not alone thanks to my own tears and my connection with them or something. That's kind of a fun way to read that. Um, they only lived for but a moment. They only knew myself and the fall. And I think that's really interesting because like this they could be talking about the tears, right? But it's also like this could be talking about like you, right? I mean, we've been using like they for the tears the whole time, but like only lived for a moment, only knew myself in the fall. And I think there's this idea of like falling and then like falling in and out of love, right? If we take this poem as like a romantic loss, right? And this grief, um, then like they only knew myself and the fall. And right then it was, and at the end, though, at least they were known by someone, anyone at all. And it's almost like the love was worth it, whatever it was, because it allowed this moment of being known, being seen, right, at all for any moment, even if it spiraled, even if it fell. And I think it does a nice way of just like gently tugging all of these bits of imagery together, right? Where like this can kind of talk about everything in the poem and every character in the poem, even though it's talking about the tears, which is great, right? The anthropomorphization, I think, allows that kind of like fuzziness, right? And I think that's another feeling of this poem. It's kind of vague. It's kind of fuzzy, and it feels like there are all these little pieces of ideas, right? All these little ideas that are like woven together, but not in the way of where like you weave something and it's very like tightly done and like perfectly woven. It's kind of like a very loose, like thick yarn. I feel like that like just gently kind of ties the ideas of this poem into each other, right? And they're not necessarily like packed or forced together, right? But this poem kind of just like sits in that space, right? Steady, soft, secure, not tight, not forced. It's relaxed in a way, uh, kind of accepting the gravity, right? Um, I think that's how, if I had to describe the, what feelings do I have and what does this poem feel like? It's those. And it's bittersweet, right? Because it's beautiful and it's acknowledging that the thing was good and we were seen for a moment, but it's gone, right? And that's sad, and it has to be sad, but it can also be beautiful. So I like that. Do you have any other questions? I love seeing this theme you found of the seeing. Yeah, the you love seeing this theme. Yeah. Uh, um, I think the seeing is a really interesting thing in this poem for sure. To watch and to see and to not be able to see. Um, do you have other questions, other thoughts? Does anyone else have more thoughts on this poem or interpretations or things you feel like I missed that are glaring and jumping out on you at the page and I should be talking about, from anyone? That is all welcome. I'm really obsessed lately with this idea of anthropomorphization. Like, it's almost something I've never really engaged with. Um, in my poetry, at least like actively, it's something I really want to practice. To me, this poem is about loneliness. Yeah, and I think this idea that I talked about really gives that lonely feeling, right? Using the tears and the anthropomorphization as a barrier between myself and others. It's a really like really lovely technique. Could be just because I was lonely when I wrote it. Yeah, and I think it can, things can always take on different meanings later, or they always take on different meanings with different people. But yeah, there is that loneliness, right? But there is the at least they were known. And that's the thing with loneliness, right? You almost don't get to be lonely if you don't know the feeling of being together with someone, right? And you don't get to know the feeling of togetherness if you've never really had to grapple with loneliness in their like kind of full extents. These things are dependent upon each other. Um, and I like this tension, this black and white of a loneliness and togetherness that this poem plays with. I think it's a very powerful one. Uh, I feel like one that's been on my mind as a person and as an artist lately. So uh, I really like this poem as a poem for me right now, and where I've been at. So that's good. Yeah. I think it's interesting because like I've been like a very lonely person for like a long time, and I'm starting to like branch out and like have more friendships and more like closeness with people in my life. So this poem like almost speaks to me in an opposite direction, where like I feel like I'm moving into this warmer, this warm house kind of part of my life. So I think that's why it has a little bit of a nicer tone. But like on the page, definitely very sad, lonely, crying, right? All of that. But that's the beauty of it, right? We all get to see things differently. Thanks for reading. I haven't thought of any other questions. Well, thank you so much for submitting, and I will read it again. I know that was a much shorter amount of time than we spent on wombats, but I think this poem's quite concise. I think we had a good discussion of these things. So hopefully that was nice. Here's Tears by Bookworm, or Bookworm Rar. Tears form at the edges of my eyes. They watch you feel warm in that house of yours, wondering what it feels like to live the way you do. Tears drip their way past my nose, something I see every second of every day. I've blocked it out, but still they traverse the planes of my skin, clinging on until gravity pulls them away. Tears fall from my face into a downward spiral, a drop, a stream, a torrential current, forgetting what it feels like to be alone. Tears hit the fabric of my shirt. It's interesting. I have to stop for a moment. It's interesting that you say this is a lonely poem. And the funny thing is, right, we have this line, forgetting what it feels like to be alone. And there is this togetherness, right, very much present in the poem, on the page, in the tears, and in this sort of grief, right? But at the same time, like, that has only emerged from the fact of like not being with this person up here, this you, right? So it's like there's like a togetherness in the loneliness, right? So it's like fundamentally lonely. These things play off of each other. And now I have to start over. Tears by Bookworm. Tears form at the edges of my eyes. They watch you feel warm in that house of yours, wondering what it feels like to live the way you do. Tears drip their way past my nose. Sometimes I see every second... I messed up. Something I see every second of every day. I've blocked it out, but still they traverse the planes of my skin, clinging on until gravity pulls them away. Tears fall from my face into a downward spiral, a drop, a stream, a torrential current, forgetting what it feels like to be alone. Tears hit the fabric of my shirt. Each one exists for only a second longer, fading away into the air around. They only lived for but a moment. They only knew myself in the fall. At the end, though, at least they were known by someone, anyone, at all. Tears by Bookworm. Thank you so much for submitting this poem to be read. Thank you. And you say thanks for reading. You are very welcome. But also thank you, because it is not without the submissions. It is not without the submissions of... I'm not going to... Double negative mess me up. I need people to submit to have stream work and happen. And when people submit, I get to read it on stream and share it with people. And it's amazing, right? And that's really lovely. And thank you everyone else who's watching, right? For giving Bookworm Rar, their poem, some of your attention and thought and care as well. That's an excellent, beautiful thing. Yeah. Ah, lovely poems today. Very, very good stuff. And more to think about on anthropomorphization. I guess that's a theme. That's interesting. I need to think. I need to process that on my own time. Um, I think that's all the writing I'm gonna read today from chat. I think that's the extent of that. And I have a like feature performance kind of spot on a thing coming up that I need to have 20 minutes of poetry, and I think I want to have ambient music written by me backing that performance, but I don't have 20 minutes of ambient music, nor do I necessarily have the poem that I want to read. So I think that's what I'm going to be spending the rest of my day doing, and that will be done, of course, not live on the stream. So I guess that means this is the part where I thank you all for watching. And thank again the people who submitted for giving your work, doing the very admirable thing of having your work shared by someone else. I appreciate that trust in me to share your work. That's a very beautiful thing. Thank you everyone for watching or lurking or both, giving that amazing gift of your time to not only myself, but to the poetry of others and these peers in our poetic community. And I hope every one of you keeps making art that you love and that you keep finding beauty in the world around you. So that's what we can do. Thanks for watching. Bye.